Welcome, everyone. This is the PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating Podcast. Here we chat about all things boating with marine industry professionals and enthusiasts who spend all the time they can out on the water.
Hi, this is Tanya Becker, and I'm your host for today's episode of PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating. I'm joined by my guest, Phil Stephanuik, Product Engineering Manager at Turning Point Propellers, and Charlie Haimes, a partner with the Haimes Coleman Group. Based in Jacksonville, Florida, Turning Point Propellers' mission is to engineer and produce the best performing propellers in every category. The Haimes Coleman Group is a sales organization made up of highly experienced and knowledgeable marine industry professionals. They represent 20 of the leading brands in the industry, including Turning Point Propellers, and have a fascinating bird's eye view of the market. In addition to designing and manufacturing high-performing propellers, Turning Point is driven to help every boater become a prop expert and provide the tools to help them find the ideal propeller for their boat. Today's episode is sort of a crash course in propeller physics and how the characteristics of a prop contribute to a boat's performance. Thanks so much for being here today, guys.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for having us. Looking forward to another fun day with PartsVu.
So let's start really basic. Phil, how do propellers contribute to a boat's performance on the water? I think they're pretty important, right?
Well, it's actually the most important thing in the boat, that and a tachometer. It's the only thing that moves the boat. So without the correct pitch and diameter, a boat just doesn't run very well. All motors need to run in a certain RPM range, and the propeller is what limits that RPM range.
And it controls issues directly related to RPM, like speed, fuel economy, that sort of thing, correct?
Speed, fuel economy, lift, cornering, hole shot. Yeah, it's all interrelated with the propeller. And that's why if you look in some of the books, there's hundreds of different styles of propellers. And there's a reason for that, because there's so many different boat and motor combinations and weight combinations in the boats.
Plus, each boat design is very different. Each hull design is very different. How the water flows across the bottom of the boat as it gets to the propeller is very different. So it's not an exact science, and having a good design propeller and technical know-how behind the company it makes a huge difference.
Charlie, do you find as you're out and about in the industry talking to folks, is there a lot of confusion or widespread understanding of how propellers work?
No, I don't know if there's as much confusion as much as not really understanding what that propeller does to the boat. As we talked about, top end speed, mid range, fuel economy, hole shot. These are all things that make a difference in running your boat. So as a consumer, they think, just like in your car, you put a set of tires on and it may be a little louder or not, or you may want an off-road tire. Well, with a propeller, there's a vast difference between performance outcomes with propellers. So it is more complicated, and I think it's something that a lot of consumers don't realize, the performance advantages of going with a higher quality propeller like Turning Point.
Phil, could you, for our listeners, I think they'd appreciate it if you could just explain some of the basic physics of propellers. How do characteristics like cup, rate, pitch, number of blades, and all these factors work together?
Yeah, well, the fastest propeller would be a single-bladed prop, but because of the balance problem, you can't have it. Two-blade props were pretty prevalent in the 50s and 60s, but with the higher horsepower engines, they didn't work very well either, and they come up with a three-blade. And now some of the newer engines are running 4- and 5-bladed props. Some of the big 1,000-horse, boats are running a 5- and 6-bladed props. Not many, but there are some. And a propeller's got different parts to it. You've got the hub barrel, inner hub barrel, outer hub barrel, and the exhaust flows through the inner hub barrel to get out of the engine and, into the water. And then you have the blades, and blades can be high rake or low rake. It depends if you've got an inboard. You've got very flat blades. It's a constant pitch propeller, and it's sometimes negative rake. Rake is the angle of the tip out and away from the boat. The higher the rake, the more angle you have, and also the higher the rake, the more the hull wants to lift and the bow wants to come up. The higher you can get it to a point, less wetted surface, more speed. how can I explain it? The pitch of the propeller is from the leading edge of the blade up to the trailing edge. And a lot of guys say, well, I have a 19 pitch prop, and then I measure the cupped area and it's 22 pitch. And that's the pitch progression. But it starts, a 19 pitch prop sometimes will start at 16 pitch at the leading edge and end at 21 or 22 at the trailing edge. So, there's a lot involved in the geometry of the blades that people really don't need to understand, but they do need to understand the RPMs of the motor. Your engine should turn, say you've got a 4-stroke engine today, a 150 Yamaha, that should turn between 57 and 6,000 RPMs, 5,700 to 6,000, somewhere in that 300 RPM range to get the best overall performance out of the boat, meaning whole shot, mid-range acceleration, and lift.
One thing I want to elaborate to that, I think, going back to the basics, on a boat, when you're dealing with an engine and a propeller, there isn't a transmission on an outboard or an inboard or a stern or whatever it may be. Like your car, you've got, gear, first gear, second gear up to, now we have 8 and 10 speed transmissions. The boat, there's one speed. So this prop has to do everything. It's got to be great for a whole shot, getting you up on plane. It's got to be great at mid-range for fuel economy, carrying loads, whether you're, wakeboarding, skiing, tubing, whatever it may be, cruising, and it has to have top end. So it's this one part that's got to be like a universal application. And that's huge, where most consumers don't understand that. And that's a big area of misunderstanding, and that's where a great propeller manufacturer like Turning Point can give that consumer the right prop that's going to do all those things. Come out of the hole, get on plane really quick, great fuel economy, great top end. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that, moving on today.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we started Turning Point Propellers 25 years ago, this May. We sat down, and the three of us that actually started the company had about a 6-hour conversation on, what we should do, how we should do it, what props we should design. And, my thought always was, let's not build the same as everybody else. And back then, everybody was copying everybody. Mercury and OMC, had their props, and then everybody in the aftermarket copied those, and they made poor copies. So we sat down and said, well, we're not going to copy anything. We're going to come out with something that we feel is better and newer, with the newer geometry and newer styles. And that's something that we've done. And I think over the last 25 years, we've proved that was a good choice.
Yeah, I think some of your propellers have vented barrels and so forth. I mean, how does that contribute, to the performance?
Well, venting props actually came by through the racing fellows down in Tennessee years and years ago. One guy found out that if he drilled a hole behind each blade, he could get on plane a quarter to a half a boat faster than everybody else. And then, the prop guys like myself, I had a prop shop at that time. I started doing that up in Chicago. And this was back in like 1980. And we decided, again, when we were talking about Turning Point, that is something I wanted, because back then it was mostly 2-stroke motors, and they really needed those vent holes. With the advent of the 4-strokes today, they're not quite as critical. They don't hurt anything, so we're leaving them in, but they don't make as big a difference as they did in the old 2-stroke motors. But what happens is the exhaust leaks out through those holes onto the positive side of the following blade, and it creates a little bit of slip. And the quicker you can get those blades up to RPMs, the quicker the boat planes. And once it starts to plane, the exhaust is going through the hub cavity so hard, it basically creates a vacuum and seals the hole off. So from then on, it doesn't do anything anymore for to help the propeller.
I think I realized that you owned a prop shop years ago. I didn't realize until today that you're from Chicago, and that's where the shop was.
Yeah.
So how did that that prop shop, kind of growing up, I guess, professionally in a prop shop, how did that contribute to what you brought to Turning Point?
Well, I was extremely lucky. I had a wife at the time who was busy with 3 young boys, and she didn't mind me being away every weekend testing props, and I was allowed to go to tour, and I was fishing the National Bass Fishing Circuit at the time also. So while I was at tournaments, I would test guys' boats and props, and almost every weekend while I was at home, I was at a marina playing with their boats and props and different designs that I came up with, tweaking a stock propeller, bending it different ways, changing the cup, changing the rake, changing the pitch, and sometimes changing the diameter. So I was a very, very lucky guy early on where I got to do all of that with no interference from anybody. And I spent a lot of time. And for me, it was fun. And even today, 40 some years later, I'm still having a ball. It's really exciting.
It sounds like you had a good understanding of the basics of how propellers and so forth work, but it was a lot of trial and error that you learned over the years.
Yeah, and even I've talked to some of the top guys at Mercury over the years too, and I've been a member of the National Marine Propeller Association since it started. I was one of the first 10 guys to sign up, and even the big guys at Mercury, it's the same thing. It's trial and error and guessing. And is this going to work? Is it not going to work? I actually did one prop for a fellow, and all I did was tweak the leading edge, imperceptible, honest to gosh. It was less than a 16th of an inch. His race boat at the time gained about a quarter of a mile an hour, and he never lost a race all summer because of that one change. And I would have never guessed. He just come in saying, hey, I need to get up on plane a little bit quicker. So I said, well, I think I know what to do. So I bent it, and off he goes. And a couple of weeks later, he said, I've won every race. So, and then I've done other things to propellers also that just killed them. The boat wouldn't get on plane, So you learn by trial and error, but that's the fun part of the whole thing. So.
And you used to race, Charlie, so you know this, very well, right?
Oh yeah, I raced for 18 years, and we did a lot of prop testing, and it's amazing what a boat will do, whether it accelerates, top end, vibrating as much as that, because of the race boats, you're surfacing propellers, 3-blade, 4-blade, 5-blade. We ran even 6-blade props, but we learned a lot with testing, and it's still, you're testing with a stopwatch, seat of the pants. Today we got unique, we got GPSs and accelerometers. There's a lot of unique factors we can utilize in our testing, but yeah, it's not an exact science. And you could have two identical boats with two identical setups, and it'll need two different props doing the same speed. It's crazy.
Right.
Because remember, the medium we're running through is water. But water is not perfectly flat. And you run from salt water to fresh water. Well, salt water's got different lifting characteristics than fresh water because of the salt and the aeration. Time of year, cold water, warmer water. So there's so many variables, and we have to try to build that universal prop that does everything great, right? So it's tough. Now, the racers were very exact. We want perfection. So, and it's a lot more critical. But racers, you pick a wrong prop one day, whether one pitch off, and it can be the difference between winning the race and back at the pack. That's how critical it is too. So it's a lot of fun. I love testing props. I love running boats. So like Phil, anytime on the water testing boats, it's a day of fun.
Yeah. And another thing with, Charlie's racing, some of the racers found out if they turn their props in, put a right-hand prop on the left-hand side of the boat and a left-hand prop on the right-hand side, it'll carry a boat differently, sometimes better, sometimes worse. And other boats need the conventional setup where you have port and starboard and left and right props. So, it's guys like Charlie who help guys like me, So we all kind of work together that way. Yeah.
What are some of the more advanced characteristics that come into play? Vent holes and so forth. We kind of discussed that a little bit, but anything else you can think of?
Well, different blade designs. Like I've designed a new dual geometry 4-blade that is unlike any other in the world right now so far, and it's got two different blade designs. It's got two cleaver blades that are actually larger in diameter than the two round ear opposing blades. And what that design does is, as the boat starts to plane, all boats, when you hit the throttle, the bow comes way up, almost to where you can't see over it. and it plows and plows and plows, and then finally gets up on plane. With the four-blade, as the bow comes up, the transom comes up with it. So you're getting a flatter, quicker acceleration or hole shot. And for most boats, you can actually see over the bow running our four-blade. And then once you're up and running and they start trimming, and it changes from that cleaver blade that's lifting the transom now to the rounder blades who want to lift the bow. So the boat is lifted higher out of the water horizontally with our four-blade than most other props.
It's a great propeller, Tanya. I mean, it just carries the boat so well. You know, there's the torque in the steering is minimum, and on a single engine application, it's really a great prop for that. You know, that universal prop we talked about that gets, you know, whole shot, mid range, fuel economy, top end speed. It's like that magic prop. You know what that Phil created in it. It is my number one selling prop when I sell props that I market to consumers and dealers, just because it's that good.
This is a little bit of I think a lot of people would want to know this. The difference in performance, the difference in performance characteristics between what you can do with a four-blade, you know, five-blade, six-blade prop. I mean, where do the different numbers of props really come into play?
What do you mean? Why the different designs?
Or, you know, why would you have a five-blade prop versus a six-blade?
In a workboat situation, you want a little larger blades and more blades to push a heavy load. In a racing situation, you know, Charlie can talk about, you know, 4 and 5 and 6 bladed props there, but it's horsepower, torque, and pitch on those blades, and the diameter of the you know, the multi-bladed propellers. They just do different things.
Yeah. So Tanya, the technology with boat designs have changed. So we have these ventilated step bottom boats, right? So you're aerating the bottom of the boat, which is increasing speed and giving you better fuel economy. Well, all those air bubbles and the aeration off the bottom of your boat eventually got to hit a propeller. So as Phil was talking about, you know, what bigger blade diameters, unique blade diameters, grabbing more water makes these propellers more efficient. So we talk about, and we're getting technical, slip factor, how much slippage, and that's, we're getting pretty technical there. But the higher number of blades, that slip factor tends to go down. You're grabbing more water because there's more blade in the water, if you kind of visualize that. So that's what's helping with slip factors, carrying the boat a little bit better. It really goes about surface area. You can get surface area a couple ways: more blades, or like our OS series, it's got big blade diameter. You're grabbing a lot of water. So like in that multiple engine application, our OS is extremely more efficient than a lot of our competitors out there too, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, it makes tons of sense.
Yeah, and the OS, it was actually designed to run its best in the mid-range, you know, where the majority of boaters run, when they run out, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 miles, they don't run wide open. They run between 3,500 and 4,500 RPMs. And, you know, I worked for over a year on trying to get the geometry just right so that in that range, you're getting a little bit more speed, but a lot more fuel economy. And we've seen up to about 23% better fuel economy on some boats because of that. So, you know, and that's pretty good savings over the course of a year. It's not a top-end propeller, because I get the offshore guys down in Miami, hey, I want a fast propeller, you know. That's just not the fast propeller, but it's the best, I think, all-around prop, you know, for a fisherman or somebody who's just going cruising.
Obviously, different boaters have different performance objectives. I mean, they have different boats, different, you know, boating on different types of water, doing different things. You know, how do you, and maybe Charlie, you know, you have kind of a really broad view of the market, I think. You know, how do boaters kind of categorize or approach propeller selection by the performance objectives they're trying to achieve?
Well, I think I'm going to start out, I'm going to elaborate on your subject here, but most importantly for us as a propeller manufacturer is getting a propeller that the boat is going to be able to utilize and never get stranded. And where I'm going with this is, we've got a couple of different avenues. So, you know, our company with Turning Point, we only make interchangeable hub propellers. So there's a housing and a hub that go together to make an assembly, right? But we have competition out there that makes rubber hub props. And rubber hub props have been around since the beginning because that's how the props were first designed. And it's a hub, it's pressed into a housing. Well, if you've been a long time boater, and I've done seminars, I've had seminars where there's been 50, 75 dealers in a room, and I'll ask them, how many boaters in here have ever gone boating and spun a hub? And we talk about spinning a hub. And 2/3, 3/4 of the dealers in there are raising their hands. And I said, okay, how did you feel when you spun that hub? Now, what happens when a propeller hub spins, you can't get the boat on plane. You're idling home. So the answers from these dealers were, oh my God, it took me 3 hours to get home. My wife was yelling at me. There was a storm coming. I was scared to death, And then I said, hey, so, what would you have paid to get home? And they're like, anything. So rubber hub props tend to be less expensive props. They're economy props is sometimes what boat builders put on their boats when they leave the factory. Well, we don't have any rubber hub props in our line. So I'm going down a road of, first off, let's make sure your customers or any customer buys a propeller and hub combination that's got an interchangeable hub. These designs are built to last. And this hub is, like with Turning Point, our hub has a lifetime warranty. So that hub can be used with 10 different housings over time. You could destroy a propeller, and the hub, you just still use it in your next prop. And that could be with our props or anybody else's props. So I want to start out with that. Then let's go from a safety, reliability factor, make sure we're getting an interchangeable hub. Okay. Second, down the road, we talked about dual, they want, whole shot. You want to get on plane with a variety of number of people in there, or a heavy fishing boat that's got the live wells loaded, ice chest filled. They got to get up on plane. Then you want to talk about mid-range cruising. So you got fuel economy. And now with the price of gas getting, we're $4 at the pump, but it's probably over $5 on the water. If we can save, as Phil said, up to 23% in fuel economy, that's dollars in your pocketbook, right? So as a consumer, you're going to pay anything for a better prop that gives you 23% better fuel economy as an extreme. So they want that. But then, some of the go fast guys, bass boat guys, they want a good top end prop. They want to get to that fishing hole before the other guy in the tournament gets there, right? So they're looking for a variety of things. But me personally, it's going to be getting up on plane whole shot and great cruising application, that mid-range, you're cruising at that, 4,000, 4,500, and a boat that steers real well at that speed, gets through traffic, you're getting through boat wakes, and makes the boat settle down and ride comfortably. I say it's when the boat's happy, right? And our dual geometry prop does that extremely well, along with our OS series of propellers.
Another nice thing about our hub system is if a guy has a 150 Mercury and he's running, say, a 14 1/4, 19 or 21 pitch prop, and the motor blows up, and now he buys a Suzuki, well, he can knock the hub out of those props that he's got and buy a Suzuki hub and put it in and not have to change propellers an awful lot of times. So, that a lot of guys I talk to they would have to throw props away because they wouldn't fit the other motors, where with ours, we make one prop and a ton of different hubs to fit all the motors.
And you brought up a good point, Charlie. I mean, the performance boaters, racers, bass tournament fishermen, anglers. I mean, obviously they need to do what they need to do, but there's a heck of a lot of people out there that really should understand that with these gas prices the way they are, and they're not going anywhere real soon. I don't think. Looking at a different propeller is a good solution just for some savings to help you boat some more hours without breaking the bank.
No, agreed. And whether it's our dual geometry of stainless steel or even on aluminum, they both run very similar because the designs are identical. So either if you're a boat, you can't afford a stainless prop, you still want to get an upgraded propeller, with our Turning Point, Hustler series, our 4 blades, they run very, very well.
And one of the reasons for that is we do not die cast our propellers. We squeeze cast them. So our blades are very stiff in our aluminum props, and they don't flex out like the older design propellers used to do. So we normally, what we see is about a mile to a mile and a half an hour slower with our aluminum, but the same amount of lift, the same cornering, the same hole shot, everything stays basically the same. So if you go from aluminum to stainless, you don't see a huge difference. And if you can't afford stainless, you still get stainless performance over and above the old style props.
Yeah, when we launched our first 4 blades a number of years ago, when we did our prop testing, we compared it against our competition stainless, and we surpassed their top end speed with our aluminum prop. Right? I mean, and dealers couldn't believe it, and they were like going, "No way!" So to elaborate on that, so having a spare propeller, let's say you have a twin engine, triple engine boat, you're going offshore, an aluminum prop's a great backup and a spare prop. So you go overseas, you run aground. Now you've put that aluminum prop on there, and it's going to run just like your stainless did on the other motor, right? So they're great spare props, lightweight because they're aluminum, and definitely a lot more cost effective than a stainless in that application.
And Turning Point, I know, has on your website, a great prop selection tool that that I'll put in the show notes for people to use it as a tool just to select the propeller they best need. I found it very useful.
It's very useful.
It's a great tool for a consumer, a dealer, OEMs. We have a lot of people using that. We're the number one aftermarket prop site where consumers and dealers go to find out application information. So it's heavily used. It's got great information there. It takes in the variables of weight and what the boater's doing, other accessories on the boat. It's definitely very comprehensive, and it's always up to date because of the technology that it uses where it's pulling the information. So it's a great tool for anybody to use.
Well, as I think everybody knows, propeller blades will become compromised over time. Just normal wear and tear. You run into something. When is it time to replace a propeller, and when can you just fix it?
Well, that nobody wants a chip out of their blades. Nobody wants a bent blade. Although in my years of repairing props, I had props that came in that needed over 3/4 of an inch of welding done to the entire blade, and then grinding and rebalancing. But a couple of small nicks doesn't mean a whole lot. And what I tell people is to run your fingers down the blades. If you've got a rough edge, just take a light file and smooth it. Don't take too much metal off, and you're good to go. But today, with today's prices on aluminum propellers, there's an awful lot of prop shops out there that are just selling a prop to a guy, and it's only going to save a guy. To fix one today, depending on where you live, can be anywhere, like a Merc Cruiser prop, can be anywhere from $75 to $150 to fix them. So, and you can normally get one of our props for around $125, $130, brand new, that doesn't need fixing. So,
and that's with our unique, like rubber hub props, Tanya. You're buying a hub and housing is in a single assembly. With ours, because you're buying a hub separate. So when you need a new propeller, say you destroy that aluminum, the hub's still good. So in reality, it's a lot cheaper than buying a rubber hub prop because you only need the housing because that hub's going to last forever. So it is cheaper.
And in stainless steel, they're 98% of the time, if you damage one, you can get it fixed, and you should get it fixed because it's cheaper to have a stainless fixed than to buy a new stainless. And a good NMPA qualified prop shop can make that stainless run as good or better than when it was new.
I don't know how a propeller could run better than one you designed, Phil, but maybe so. Yeah.
Well, they do. I'd like to say ours are absolutely perfect, but you can always make a propeller run a tad better. You can.
Yeah, that's true. What should boaters do to just basic maintenance on their propellers? The good rubbing your finger on the blades trick is a good one, but just preventive maintenance kind of stuff.
Really, preventive maintenance is looking at the prop, making sure it's not bent or nicked up. And secondly, you want to take the propeller off at least once every 6 weeks during the summer. Fishing line tends to wrap around behind the thrust washer, and nobody knows that, or very few people know that. And so you take the prop off. The thrust washer sometimes will gall on the shaft, and it won't pull off. So you have to take a ball peen hammer and kind of crack it pretty hard on the edge, and it'll pop itself off. And behind that, because fishermen unfortunately throw line in the water all over the place. Monofilament and braid, and that gets back there and heats up and then cools. Heats up and then cools. And you can actually eat a seal completely out of a lower unit just with the fishing line behind it. So, I tell everybody at least once every 6 weeks, if you're using your boat a lot, take it all off and check behind that thrust washer for fishing line. And then when you put everything back on, put a light coating of grease on the splines. You don't have to gob grease on by the handful, just a nice light coating. Put the prop back on, tighten her down, and you're good to go.
Can you think anything else people should know, Charlie, that comes to your mind?
Well, it's really just doing a visual. It's not really a maintenance, but do a visual. And every time you run your boat, go back and take a look at the prop. Are there any dings or cracks and something you need to be aware of? Just kind of just take a look at it and maybe check maybe that prop nut hasn't loosened up a little bit too. That's very simple, but there's not a lot of maintenance per se on a propeller. If you want to get really, if you got a go fast boat, maybe you can maybe polish up your stainless steel prop a little bit if you want. With our TP17 coating that Turning Point has, you don't need to do that because it's always going to be shiny. But really not a lot that you have to do from a maintenance perspective.
Not a lot of maintenance, perhaps, but there are a lot of choices when people go to buy or upgrade their propellers. And
in some cases, too many choices.
Major difference? Well, yeah,
Well, it really depends on the boat. If a bass boat guy comes in, he's going to want a performance prop, something that's going to run the boat very fast. Now, if he's got one of the newer, bigger boats, he'll want a 4-blade because he needs that extra blade to carry the load that he has in the boat. And some of these 21-foot tournament bass boats are loaded to the gills. 20 or 30 rods, 4 or 5 tackle boxes, tons of lead, so they carry a lot of weight. But mom and dad with a little runabout, say a 75 or a 90 horse engine, they're going to want a prop that's going to get it up on plane, is going to run fairly decent on top end, it's going to corner well. And then you get a working barge. A guy comes in and says, hey, I've got a 36-foot barge. I've got a 150 horse engine on it. What prop do I need? So we start out there with a large diameter lower rake propeller to allow that engine to push that big heavy barge that's moving a lot of water. So, and it's just a matter of the prop guy or the dealership asking those questions. What kind of boat do you have? What kind of performance are you looking for? Sometimes some guys come in and just say, hey, we just ski, nothing else. I need a good ski prop. So then we know, in a lot of cases, our 4-blade, our dual geometry 4-blade's a hot ticket, for ski boats. They don't over rev and they get the boats on plane extremely fast.
Charlie, when we look across the brands and the different brands out there, what does the market look like from that standpoint? Major differences across these brands.
Well, as I alluded to before, making sure that the consumer buys a good interchangeable hub like our Propeller, like our Master Guard, design hub. Like Turning Point, all of our props have an interchangeable hub, and making sure you're not getting that rubber hub that might fail where you can get stranded. That's the best starting point. But then the other features, like we have with our squeeze cast technology versus die cast. Again, it's going to make a much stronger aluminum blade. Our dual geometry, as Phil said. And then when you get to our stainless props, again, TP17, that's our coating. It makes that prop always shiny. And then, and then leading into our OS series, that's a big blade diameter and a 3-blade. So we're the prop of choice over the competition for that definitely a twin engine, triple engine application where you've got heavy big boats that are going fast, that are step bottom. You got a lot of cavitation down there. And then it's really, the company behind it. You want a name brand company you want to deal with, like Turning Point. We've been around for, 25 years. We own our own tooling. We own our own facilities. We have a stainless steel facility and an aluminum casting facility. In our stainless steel facility, our props are done by machine. So every prop is identical when it leaves the factory. It's state of the art. I can tell you most of our competitions, they don't have that. So we're kind of setting the trend in the propeller market because of that. We're the fastest growing prop company in the world right now over the last 10 years. And for the reasons we have, because of Phil, his technology, the unique features and benefits we have at Turning Point. So we got a lot to offer.
As you look out across the market, Phil, like what problems do you think there are still to solve? I mean, there's always many problems to solve. I mean, I'm sure you're working on them today. I mean, anything that you can share?
Well, there are. Pontoon boats has been a problem, and I've been working on trying to come up with a better pontoon boat prop, and when I say pontoon boat prop, what I'm talking about is a 2-log pontoon. The tri-toons today have the bigger engines, and they have a lot of props to choose from because they run more like a boat. But a 2-log pontoon is still a boat that runs a 3-bladed prop. You don't run 4 blades on those. What happens is 90% of the people that get on a 2-log pontoon want to sit up front, in front of the driver. So that buries the nose down into the water. You put a 4-blade on, and a 4-blade wants to lift the transom. So you get the nose down, the transom comes up, nose goes down deeper, prop is higher out of the water. They go to turn, and it slips like crazy. And it runs nose deep as they're running forward because you use very, very little trim on a 2-log pontoon. So we found that 3 blades are the best design for that. It's just, I think, hopefully within the next year or before I retire, we can come up with a better pontoon boat prop. But that right now, that is that and the bass boats. There's a couple of good props out there now, but we're not too far away from having a better prop. We've been working on that for the last 6 months now. So I'm really excited about that one because I'm an old bass fisherman. So
It's I spent a lot of my summer on a 2-log pontoon boat, and the kids and the dogs always want to pile up front, like a million kids, a million dogs.
Yep. Always.
The rest of us are in the back trying to.
Yeah, and the problem with those boats, they don't steer very well. They're kind of guided by the wakes, and they don't get on plane. They just kind of plow through, and again And because that motor is sitting in the middle of all this turbulent water, it's hard to find that perfect propeller. And Phil will find it. And then he can't retire until he figures that out first off, right, Phil?
That's what everybody here tells me. Yeah.
Your entire pension is riding on this, Phil. So
yes.
No pressure, but anything that you can think of that you want to share with folks before we sign off, Charlie, or?
No, really. And when you're looking for propellers, definitely go to the Prop Wizard when you want to find that right prop for your boat. And again, you can look at our website; it's very informative. We also do have a prop exchange program too. So if you happen to make a mistake on a propeller, we're the only ones in the industry that offer that. It's $25 for an aluminum and $35 for the stainless. And again, if you buy a prop, it doesn't work perfectly for your application. Hey, you know what? You shouldn't be penalized. There's a link on our website. Send it in. We'll swap it out for the next prop size you may want, and you're off and running. So we want to try to keep all of our customers happy. That's how we got to be where we are today, and we're not stopping. We're out there building cool new product and take care of customers.
And one last thing is our customer service. I answer in the midsummer probably 100 phone calls a day. And the guys get to talk to me personally, and I'm kind of bragging a little bit here, but 99% of the time I can help a guy out get the correct propeller for his boat and motor combination. And so we work very, very hard on trying to get the correct prop for everybody.
Thanks so much for being here today, Phil and Charlie. Here at PartsVu, we're proud to carry Turning Point propellers, and I encourage our listeners to go to PartsVu.com and check out our offerings. I've included a link in the show notes and also a link to the Turning Point Propeller website. And as I mentioned earlier, I did include a link to the Turning Point Propeller Prop Selection Wizard and also the YouTube channel, which contains a lot of really helpful videos there as well. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to talking with you both soon.
Wow, great. It was great.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the PartsVu Xchange Talks Boating podcast. Are you in a dock war with your boating neighbor for the cleanest boat? Check out our marine soaps, polishes, waxes, and more at PartsVu.com. And for free shipping, use the coupon code PVTalksShine, a special perk for our podcast listeners. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for boating knowledge, to keep in touch with the PartsVu community, and for special sales and promotions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and check out the show notes for the coupon code just mentioned, more information about PartsVu and the products we offer, as well as our boating blog, the PartsVu Exchange. And a big thanks to Mind for performing the original music featured within this podcast.